Well, this is pretty special. In fact, it's a special edition of Sports Spectrum's weekly slant. And you know what? It's the 22nd episode. I don't know who timed this appropriately. Maybe God did. 22nd episode as we hit 2022 and we hit the Super Bowl and the big game that is coming up down in Los Angeles. And we decided, this is not a one-person show. This isn't a two-person show. This is going to be a three-person show, as it has been all season long, as you get all of us together with Jade McCarthy, Jason Romano, and yours truly, Brock Huard, to bring you the special edition with three different guests as well, the Holy Trinity. You're going to get Dan Orlovsky, you're going to get Nick Foles, you're going to get Bill Curry, and you're going to get all three of us reflecting on what's been an amazing season. So let's bring in Jason, let's bring in Jade, because I got a few things I want to throw your way before we get those three men to wrap up what's been an incredible year. And Jade, I guess I'll just start with you. You and I kind of brought in here by Jason Romano, producer extraordinaire at ESPN for so long, does such a wonderful job at Sports Spectrum. And I'm just curious, Jade, we were chatting a little bit before the show began of what this show has meant to you as you've got an opportunity over the course of this season, as Jason and I have, to host it. What's been the most meaningful aspect of hosting this show this year?
That's a huge question, Brock. I think there's been so many different aspects of it that have really struck me. I mean, first off, I think the conversations that I've had with different guests over the course of the season have stayed with me. I'll be like driving down the street or out for a run, and something that one of them said to me will just kind of pop into my head, and I'll think about that story. And even today it was funny. I was thinking as I was on a run this morning about this, and I thought, man, there's been this guy named Tom Brady. He's been in the news cycle a little bit lately. And it brought me back to the very beginning of this show when you spoke with his quarterback coach in Clay Christensen. And I was just thinking about what he said during that conversation that you had with him about Brady and about his just unique drive to always want to get better, to just, like you're already at the edge, and like, how do you make it just that much better? And so I think so much of that has stood with me throughout the course of the season, and having the chance. What is so special about this show, and I know without even posing the question that Brock, you and Jason, you as well agree with me, is that we get to talk about football, but then we also get to ask all of our guests about their faith and what Jesus means to them and how they like to share that and how it helps them lead and how it helps them serve. And that is incredible to me, to hear their stories and to hear the moments that they've felt their faith in action, that they've felt God working in their life. It's so meaningful to be able to ask those questions, Brock.
And Jason, you do so much work behind the scenes. It's so easy for me and Jade. You tell us, who's going to be on, and we get a chance to prep for it. And then you do so much work, cutting it up, putting it all together. And we're so thankful for your heart with that, Jason. And I'm curious, from your perspective, there have been so many stories, so many anecdotes, as Jade said, so many people sharing their life story. Has there been a moment or two that has stood out to you over the course of this season, Jason?
Yeah. First of all, I got to go back to what Jade just said, that she went on a run this morning. We live in Connecticut and it's like 5 degrees here. So I need to talk to her about her running, because I'm indoors on my treadmill, but that's another.
She's got a 10-8, 6'4" 2-year-old or something like that.
I will run in
10-6'4"
any weather.
Yes.
any weather. Jason, I think it was -1. I didn't care.
You didn't care. You're getting outside. Going. Yes. Completely understand. No, but this is funny. This show birthed from an idea that we had about a year ago at the NFL draft that, Brock, you were a part of. And Jade and I had connected and talked about a few ideas and opportunities. And she had done a couple of podcasts with Sports Spectrum. And I just thought, okay, the biggest sport that we cover, the biggest sport that any of us cover, has always been football. The biggest sport where you could see the world of faith intersecting with that in many ways, not that other sports don't have people of faith, of course they do, is football. And so to be able to bring a show together that's just strictly football and faith, and I've told people this, and I think I can go on pretty good grounds here, that this is the only faith and football show that streams that's out there that you can listen to. There's a lot of faith in sports and certainly, just faith or just football, but to combine the two, it's really the only show of its kind. So I was really excited about that. To have both of you on board was amazing. That first show with Clyde Christensen, I just remember Clyde being on an iPad, and we were worried about his connection with the internet. And it's the first show that you want to come right out of the gates with. And Clyde was great. And thankfully the internet held up, and Brock did a great job. But that first show is always special. For me to get the chance early on to talk to Jim Kelly, a Pro Football Hall of Fame quarterback, was really a privilege and an honor for me. And then seeing how the Bills season played out and how great they were this year was a neat thing to be a part of. But watching the interviews that you guys got to do, there's a lot of moments this year, and there wasn't one particular that just blew my mind, I think, but the opportunities that we all got a chance to do, and I enjoy producing just as much as I enjoy hosting. So to be able to, watch you guys talk to some of the greats, in the world of football, and the unique voices, right? There was a bunch of different types of people that we were able to have on this year, between team chaplains, between high school quarterbacks, between former players, current players, former coaches, current coaches in the world of college, high school, and the NFL. I loved what this show was. I love the diversity that we had. And it makes me excited to think, could we do a season 2 next year? I certainly hope so. We'll have to see, but it makes me excited to think about where we could go, I guess, with not just this show, but with Sports Spectrum and the idea of what the weekly slant is.
Well, I think what's really cool is the Lord has used 3 former employees of a certain place to bring this show to life. I think a theme throughout the season with so many of these interviews, and I know you're going to hear it today from the 3 men that are going to join us here in just a few moments. We'll start with Dan Orlovsky. I'll get a chance to talk to him. Jade, you're going to pick Nick Foles' brain, and you'll wrap up the conversations with guests for the season, Jason, the conversation with Bill Curry. And I know all 3 of those men will say similar things to what's been a theme over this year. Is the Lord taking ordinary people and doing extraordinary things through them. And we got a Super Bowl with a very ordinary, Cincinnati team that nobody expected. And they've been an extraordinary story over the course of the season. And to me, that's a lot of what this show is. Just 3 ordinary former employees of a place coming together because we have a passion to share Jesus, to share football with all of you. And so thankful for you guys joining in this season. So with no further ado, I'm going to throw to and get to a big voice at our former employer at ESPN right now. That's Dan Orlovsky. Can't wait to catch up with Dan next. Well, he did it, Dan. Matthew Stafford made it to the Super Bowl. He did it. Tell me, Dan Orlovsky, Sunday evening, I guess, right, in Connecticut, watching that game. Take me in.
I was emotional, man. I was emotional the week before against Tampa Bay, just because the way the game ended for him. And that's kind of been one of the calling cards for him as a player in the NFL, for the people who have paid attention to him or the people who haven't. That's kind of been his calling card, and getting near the end of the game, honestly, Brock. So I felt really good. I got a ton of text messages that morning from people, friends, and they said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think America sees the best version of Matthew Stafford today." Just in conversation with him, long story short, we go to Streamsong, which is a golf resort down in Florida every year, about the week after the Super Bowl. Him and I have done it for, 6-7 years in a row. And I sent him the text 2 months ago, "Hey man, going to Streamsong the 16th or something like that of February. And you in?" And he responded back with, his response was, "Sure, but I plan to be busy that week." And, I think it was just the confidence that he had. And then Sunday night, it felt good going into the game. And once the game went to 17-7, San Francisco, I thought to myself, here it is. Like, you've been preparing for this 15-minute of gameplay stretch for a dozen years. And I've seen you do that as good as anybody. And that's when I said, our group chat for NFL Live, I said, this game's a wrap. The Rams are going to win this game. Because I just know, I believed in him in that moment, because that's when he plays his best. And I know that he believes in himself in that moment. And when that interception happened, my wife's actually videoed it. My family went nuts. I mean, I'm picking my kids up and throwing them all over. I'm down going, let's go. Just super happy for a friend, super happy for a guy that, as you know, showed up in a profession that is very hard to do every single day, and was a phenomenal teammate. And for him to have that opportunity, I was super happy for him.
This is our 22nd episode of the Weekly Slant. And we talked about it in the open of the show. I think the biggest takeaway for me, Dan, for so many of the folks that have joined this, and thanks for doing it in our season finale here before the Super Bowl and into Super Bowl week, is the Lord taking ordinary people and telling extraordinary stories through them. Matthew Stafford was the number one pick. It wasn't like he's some ordinary talent. You were his backup. He's incredibly gifted. But his story has been ordinary for 12 years in the NFL. And this season, it's extraordinary. Dan, your career for 13 years, right? Coming out of UConn, not a powerhouse, a quarterback factory, NFL factory, right? And you go 13 years through so many different places. Was this your heart to get into media? Did you know when you were done playing? I certainly didn't. And as Jason and Jade and I walked out of ESPN, you have now walked in, and it just seems like, man, has this been your gifting? Do you feel this call that this is what you're supposed to be doing?
Right now, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I love it right now. I love it. I think, Brock, for two things. When I got done, I knew I couldn't just sit still. I'm not wired like that. I don't, that's not where I'm the best version of myself, to have nothing to, as far as a work wise, to kind of have challenging me on a daily basis. So I love that. I love the challenge of trying to find stuff that you can show and teach on football tape, on a television show, to kind of have fun with and to educate with. I said this too, that the crew that I mainly work with on ESPN for the last 2 years, the NFL Live crew, and certainly the Get Up crew. My favorite part, and I'm sure you could say the same, is my favorite part of playing sports, team sports, was the time together with people that became family. And that's kind of what I have with the crew that I'm with so often now is, and I tell them all the time, you guys have become my locker room. And that was my favorite part of playing sports. And so I love being able to do it. It keeps me busy. It keeps me with a challenge on a daily basis, but also, and I'm super fortunate and blessed in this regard, man. It gives me the freedom to have my life, mainly my family, be the most important thing. As much as I do have to work, or do get to work during the football season, I live in Connecticut. I'm very rarely on a plane. I'm very rarely gone for nights. I have a lot of mornings home. So I love doing it as I sit here today.
Yeah, you mentioned locker room, and immediately, right, flashbacks to all the different locker rooms I was in. I remember in our locker room in the early 2000s, the WWJD bracelets were a big thing, right? What would Jesus do? And you'd see guys wearing them, and there's a bunch of funny stories with that. But you wear Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 on your wrist. And you got it on right there as you're sitting in the makeup room at ESPN. Oh, shoot, I wasn't supposed to tell people you're in the makeup room. So you got Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 right there on your wristband in that locker room that you go in every day. Not just the makeup room, but the studio, all of the different appearances you do.
Yeah.
Why? Why do you wear that?
Because I want people to completely understand that what I am is a walking representation of transformation. I'm a walking representation of broken. I'm a walking representation of, having a relationship with a God that, on a day-to-day basis lifts me up. On a day-to-day basis convicts my heart. on a day-to-day basis challenges me to think about things and or people, not myself. I'm not naturally like that. I'm just not. I wish I was. I wish I could sit here and tell people that I'm naturally unselfish, or I don't have an ego. That's not naturally who I am. I am a person that constantly needs to be reminded of things. It's just, I think the sports of me, the quarterback of me, it, studying notes and studying notes and studying notes and catching those reminders. So this was said to me actually from someone on Twitter, through golf. A guy, was a golf teacher, and he sent it to me. And, I think that I remember as a kid, my father used to say to me, you think you know everything. And this verse kind of leans to, lean not on your own understanding. And so I think it's a reminder for me as well, lean into God as much as I can, on the things that sometimes I don't know and or don't understand.
I think it was Tony Dungy that said to Jason Romano in that building, not in the makeup room, I don't think. I'll ask him later. But I know in that building, it said, hey, man, you got to bloom where you're planted. And right now you're planted in this place. And, Jason and Jade and I all work there, and we know the challenge of that place. You mentioned kind of ego, and you mentioned, just self-righteousness and opinions and everything that is commanded or asked of you of that employer, to put yourself out there, right? To make it all about your declarative, strong opinions. How do you bloom there? How do you bloom for him in that building that many times, Dan, asks you to be the opposite of what that verse says?
Yeah. I think that the easiest way for me, Brock, is admitting when I'm flawed, admitting when I make mistakes, admitting when I say something. And that's, so we're in this industry, in this world where, like, candidly, you root for the things that you say. You root for your take or your opinion to be right. I think that's the competitor in me. And so I think it's in the moments when you say something that maybe in the moment or in the future is incorrect, admitting that gracefully, praising others. Listen, I'm in this building 4 days a week for the most part during football season. We are working with the same people for the most part off screen every day. To sit here and think that those people, or we don't have some form of an impact on those people and the way that we talk to our castmates, the people that we're on television with, the people that we're talking about on television, to talk to them. So I think it's just the grace of saying, yeah, man, I was wrong, and kind of being okay with that, praising the people that you're on with when they're right, and lifting them up. I think is a little rare in our industry. And again, the people that don't get to be on screen, and don't reap the benefits of being on screen, but you can't be good on screen without them. I think we try to do it on a daily basis, telling those people, thank you, thank you, and lifting them up and propping them up, I think is a big kind of a cognizant aspect that I try and get across.
Hey, last two things here, because I know you got to run onto that set as well. Who in your career, in that 13-year journey in the NFL, was the most impactful as far as that bracelet you got around your wrist? Who were some?
I'm not going to give you one name; it's impossible to.
Who were some of the most impactful for you in your NFL journey that has you planted where you are today, blooming the way you are?
Yeah, first of all, John Kitna. My kids' will be changed because of John Kitna. John Kitna took a immature, narcissistic, self-absorbed guy, and under his wings, discipled me, convicted me, gave me the courage, without knowing it, to be bold in faith. Painted a very black and white picture of what faith looks like. was one of the first adult males I had ever watched in my life be maniacally competitive like I was, but also be able to want to love on his wife and love on his children and not make the cliche remarks about being married and or a dad. John Kitna. Second thing would be Josh McCown. Josh McCown taught me that loving on another adult male was good. Like embracing another adult male, 30, 35, 40-year-old guys, hugging them, telling them how great they are at things, loving on, I had never seen that in my life, Brock. This guy who, runs sprints harder than anyone I've ever seen and plays football as hard as I've ever seen, is walking up to grown men, giving them a hug and say, "Hey, bro, I love you." I've never seen that before. And that was like a really cool, like, again, gravitating pull for me. Dave Wilson, I got, who was our team chaplain, who's, church in Michigan and family first now, or family life now. I was so prepared for marriage because of Dave Wilson. Prepared. How does a husband handle this situation, that situation, love on his wife, deal with conflict, go vertical before he ever goes horizontal. My marriage, I've been married for over 12 years, is like the most awesome part of life for me. And there's no way it would be 1% of that if not for the time I spent with Dave Wilson. Mike Furry, wide receiver in the NFL, who's, just got done coaching wide receivers with the Bears, was because he showed me how you could walk without being in your face and look at me about it. Every day, the walk, just walk the walk, and you don't have to tell everybody about it. I think those four guys are probably, if I could quantify the impact that they had on my life, I could, or I would. No shot. I mean, my kids' lives will be different because of those four men.
That's beautiful. I think for the fifth time in 50 some Super Bowls, we have animal and animal. We have a ram and a Bengal in this one.
What a nugget right there.
Yeah, you can use that. I mean, go ahead and you have research check it. But I think as I looked at it, some of them are a little tough as far as human, animal.
I'm gonna get it in at some point. I'm gonna get it in at some point.
Do you have a sense and a feel for this one? Do you right now have? I know we're a little ways away from it, but do you have a sense? Is it going to be Joe Burrow? Is it going to be your buddy Matthew Stafford? Do you have a feel yet?
Yeah, my initial sense, again, because of my relationship, was I don't see how he loses, Matthew. I just don't see how he climbs his way here and doesn't find a way to win. I think the absolute world of Joe Burrow. He's one of my favorite players in the league. My kids wear his jersey. Eventually, and this game as good as anybody, the line of scrimmage matters always the most. And now they've covered it up, and that young quarterback has covered it up for a couple games now. I just don't know how long until it bites him in the butt, so to speak. And I think the Rams are talented. I think they're a phenomenal group. They play as a team. They've got great resolve. And they now have a quarterback that not only his talent won't allow it to happen, but I don't think his will allow them to lose that football game.
Appreciate you, brother. Keep blooming right there where you're planted, where Jade and Jason and I once walked. You continue to bloom, all right?
Thank you, bud. You guys are the best, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. See you, buddy.
Later, bud.
Well, continuing this special edition of the Weekly Slant, and thrilled to welcome Nick Foles in to be with us here. Nick, you've worn so many different hats, of course, currently with the Chicago Bears, but you lived through Super Bowl week and all the build up to it as a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I don't need to remind people how that ended, but tell me a little bit about how it started and what that week was like for you.
Yeah, Super Bowl week, it was crazy. You have the bye week before the Super Bowl, which is so nice. And my wife, Tori, just the other day was asking me, hey, what wouldn't you all just like want to get to the game? And I'm like, no, it is so nice having that bye week because you actually go through your normal preparation week as if you were playing that next Sunday, but then you travel to the game and you get to the game and then you go through another preparation week just because there's so much chaos, there's so much media, there's so much going on. You want to make sure you have that really good prep week before you go. And it was key. It was total lockdown, just focus. Like, only person I really talked to on the phone was my wife during that time, just because I needed to eliminate any distraction. And I made sure I took time to myself in the morning each day before I started the day. But it was a really great time. I think the biggest thing was just being present in the current moment and not thinking about the next day or even the Super Bowl game day. It was just, all right, it's, the first day of the bye week. And then just every day from then on out, I just focused on what I had to do that day and just maximized it.
As you kind of reflect on that team, and I had a chance to talk to Doug Peterson about that team and just the nature of it and what it meant to him. And I'm curious for you because I shared this with him. My former pastor, who has since retired, spoke about that team and the Bible study that you guys had the night before the game. And Coach Peterson talked a little bit about the makeup of that team. And I'm wondering what your memories are in terms of how the Lord led you with that team and how significant that quiet time that you just mentioned was for you in the build up to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, ever since I joined the Philadelphia Eagles, even when I was drafted, it was always a very spiritual team. Not everyone's a believer in Jesus Christ. There was always a lot of believers in Jesus Christ within the facility, within the locker room. But it was the players beforehand, going way back when. There was always players that God had placed there that continued the growth, that continued the Bible study, continued the chapel service. Herb Lusk and Ted Winsley have been there for a very long time and done a great job of stewarding all the players and coaches that go into the facility. So just being a part of that team, specifically that year, we had a really strong group of believers, but we also had an amazing group of men in the locker room that just really got along and really cared for one another. And we knew very early on, even in OTAs, like before the season started, it was a really special group of players, but not only players, but coaches. And just walking through the building, whether it was talking to the janitors or going in the cafeteria and getting food and talking to everyone in there, or the players' assistants, whatever, everyone it was just very unique, and you really enjoyed going to work every single day. It wasn't always easy. There was adversity just like anything else, but because it was a great group, we were able to overcome anything that came our way. And obviously, for me personally, it was, the Lord leading the way, the Lord, taking a step back before we even joined the team that year. My wife and I had to decide, like, do we go back to Philadelphia, or there might be a better opportunity elsewhere? And we just had our daughter, Lily, and we just said, you know what, Philly was such a special place before. We never wanted to leave. We were traded away. This will be unique going back. I have to put my ego to the side of what happened and just say, you know what, I'm going to go there, support a young quarterback, and it'll be a great community for our family and our young daughter to go back there and live and be a part of. And I'm really grateful we did, because it was that. And then going to, like, fast forwarding to, like, the season in the mornings, just that morning time with the Lord in the Bible. I have a journal in my office somewhere over there of, like, basically the last half of the season of waking up most mornings and journaling and then reading the word. And when we wrote the book Believe It, I was able to go back to that journal and really, see what I was writing about, so everything could be accurate when we wrote the book, and just told the story. And it wasn't, and when I wrote the book, we had already won the Super Bowl, but I went back and I got to see the struggle of each day. And, like, I was like, man, I totally forgot, like, I was struggling like that, or the emotions in me were this, or this is who I was talking to and leaning on, and this is what I was reading in the word. So I'm really grateful that I have that journal, and I can't say enough about journaling. That was really the first time I began journaling, and it was because I was overwhelmed. And I needed to put something on paper and just see what was going on in my heart. But that was some of the most fruitful times I've had.
Is that something that you've continued to do?
It is. It is something I've continued to do. It's not journaling, not every day. I actually journaled right before this because it's been a couple, maybe like a week or so since I last journaled, just because I wanted to get my heart right before coming on here and, speaking about the story and what the Lord did and just being open and real about it. But I have journals over here on the bookshelf. I have digital journals. I find it more of an exercise to just see what's going on in my heart. And
Sure.
I have to take the time to, it makes me slow down. And when I'm writing it out, like I actually have to think about what is really going on because it's such a fast paced life nowadays. And then in the NFL, like everything is so routine oriented. You're maximizing your time, and you really never take the time to check your heart. And so it's been really great for that.
Yeah, I know. Part of your book that really struck out to me is when you talk about all the different labels that you can wear in the course of 1 week as a quarterback in the NFL. And I think that's, you can multiply that out to life, right? Because we all can be labeled in so many different ways, and you have to be able to put them aside. And sometimes putting pen to paper or, hitting the keypad and typing it out, like, can actually make you recognize that, because you do have to slow down and think about it, and see what's underneath the surface, if you will. Would you say you have learned throughout the course of this season and your experience in Chicago?
I'd say the biggest thing that I've learned about my experience in Chicago is really when I walk through the door, I have to put my ego to the side. I can't bring it into the building. I really have to control what I can control, and that's my attitude each and every day, even when things aren't going how I would like them, how I take notes, how I prepare, and then just making the most of the time with my teammates, whether it's, before the day begins, being in the hot and cold tubs, just getting the body ready, or in the sauna. Sauna's sometimes the best time because it's usually just you and a couple other guys, and you take your headphones out and you just chat and get to know what's going on in their life, how they're doing, what they're thinking, how they're feeling for the week. That's the biggest thing. And just being present each and every day and just basically just doing my job that day. And then when I get home, make sure that I can get my heart right to step through the door in my real job. I say job, but my real life begins in the sense of being there with my wife. We have 2 little kids. We have a dog, and just making sure I can be the best I can be then. And I'm not always perfect. It's like there's days where I get home and I'm spent and I'm exhausted, or maybe I'm frustrated, and my wife will know it. And she's always been graceful with it and be like, hey, I'll take the kids up. Why don't you take a few minutes? And we sort of figured out a routine that works for us, where she'll take the kids up, bathe them, get them ready for bed. I'll spend that time downstairs, whether it's listening to something or whatever that'll fill my heart up, and I'll just clean the downstairs. I'll clean the dishes. I'll vacuum. I'll make sure all the toys are put up, and we just use a 30-minute pocket just to reset. And then I'll go up and say goodnight. Usually our son's already asleep. We just want to get him down right now as quickly as possible, because then the chaos of the house is totally minimized. And then our daughter really just likes the time with us, and specifically my wife. She wants to. Tori's like her role model, which is so cool. So they have their bedtime with books and music, and every now and then she'll let me come in there, but I usually have to sweeten the pot with hey, I'll let you watch a Power Rangers video for 5 minutes, or something like that, to talk her into letting me go up there. But it's been really good.
How old is she now, Nick? Your daughter Lily?
She'll be 5 in June, and then Duke will be 2 in June. So it's a fun age. They're a lot of fun, but they they wear us out pretty good. By the end of the night, when it's time for us to relax, we maybe get a TV show in, and then it's time to go to sleep.
I feel ya. I don't even know if my husband and I get the TV show anymore. The kids go to bed and we're both like, all right, can we space out in a book, read a little bit, unwind, and that's it. You're done.
Yep. That's very real.
One last thing I wanted to ask you about, because you've talked before about an interest down the road in being a pastor. Is that something that you still think about? Like, do you think about life after football? I feel like it, it happens fast when it does happen. And I hope you have many more years of football ahead of you. But I always wonder if guys are thinking about down the road while they're still in the game, because it is so all encompassing to do it day in and day out.
I honestly think about it all the time. I don't want to in my career and not know what direction I'm going. So I think about it all the time. What will I do next? Because whenever I'm done, I'll still be a young man. And I just turned 33. I have one more year on my contract. I'll play out this year and we'll see what happens after that. But I want to have a purpose. I don't want to say I'm retired and I'm 34, 35, 36, 37, whatever it may be. So yes, right now going through seminary through a program with Redemption Seminary, which is by Faith Life, which is Logos Bible software, which has been great. I was at Liberty, but this program, I switched to this program just because it's more a go at your own pace, which is more ideal for my lifestyle in the NFL and just having that time in the off season to go through the curriculum and then go through it with a mentor later. It's a very unique curriculum, but that's actually something I was drilling right now, things that, I really want to get better at, and, getting going on seminary and getting through that curriculum right now. I haven't been able to because we've just transitioned back to California for a little bit. So there's a lot that, that brings on. But yes, I would say like high school youth ministry, not like a lead pastor or anything. I think at, the high school, college level, young men and young women are very vulnerable in the sense of like trying to figure out who they are as human beings and
Totally.
who created them, what's going on, what is life. And sometimes we feel like we have it figured out, but then some adversity hits us and we realize we don't. But that is definitely something that's always been on my heart. And then I think, right away when I'm done, volunteer coaching at a local high school, just so I can give back to football. I love the aspect of coaching. I love helping young players out, teaching them the game, teaching them about life. And, football is a sport where not only can you teach them the X's and O's and the fundamentals of it, but you can teach them life while teaching them that. So all that's on my heart. I'm sure God will probably bring up something at the right time that I didn't even see before. And he'll be like, all right, this is the path I want you to go on. Cause that's usually how it works. My plan won't be his, but just keeping an open heart to all of it.
Hey, last but not least, I've got to ask, do you have a prediction for me in the Super Bowl this year?
Prediction in the Super Bowl this year.
Putting you on the spot.
I mean, I know Cincy doesn't like saying that they're the underdogs and that, they've expected to be there. And you can definitely tell with how they play, like they belong and they've really figured out who they are as a team and their culture. And it takes every single player and coach and going through adversity. We played them earlier in the year and they were trying to figure out who they were. And we ended up beating them. And it was much like when I was in Philadelphia, like we lost a game early in the year, I think to the Chiefs. And we're just trying to figure out who we are. And they figured out who they are, and they are playing really well. And then the Rams, home, they get to play in their home stadium.
Yeah.
They've been very good since McVay got there. And now they even played in a Super Bowl a couple of years ago. And, they have Stafford. Everyone's talking about that. He's a great quarterback. I think it'll be a really good game. I'm predicting, Cincy with an upset just because being that I've been in that underdog role. I know what it's like. I know the hunger. I expect everyone to talk a lot about the Rams the upcoming week, just how great they are, how great their defense is, how great their offense is, how great their coaches are. And I think Cincy might get a little overlooked. So I'm going to go with the underdog and predict Cincy.
I like it. The underdog takes the underdog, right? Always.
Yep, absolutely. Always.
Just believe it, right?
Yeah, it's possible.
Pun intended. Yep. Nick Foles, thanks for hanging out with us on the Weekly Slant. We really appreciate your time and just sharing some of your thoughts and how the Lord continues to work in your life and what your heart is set for on the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jade. Appreciate it.
Well, it's great to be joined here by Bill Curry, two-time Super Bowl champion, longtime coach in the NFL and college. He was, of course, an analyst at ESPN as well on the TV side for many years. And he joins us here today on Sports Spectrum. Hey, Bill, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be anywhere, actually, at this age.
78 are we, Bill, at this point? 79? How old
79.
are we? 79. Well, it's an honor and a treat.
Well, we know how blessed we are to be this age. A lot of our friends that did what we did for all those years have had some real difficulties.
Yeah, they have. It's interesting too, we've had you on our Sports Spectrum podcast a few times, and I always feel encouraged after I talk to you or just listening to you really share your stories. And I thought it'd be fun this week as we get ready for Super Bowl 56 to talk to you because you got to play in Super Bowl I. You also got to play in Super Bowl III and Super Bowl V, I believe, as well. And
That's
just
right.
thinking about those days, and the very first Super Bowl, by the way, played in Los Angeles, much like Super Bowl 56, different stadium, as you mentioned before we started recording. But can you just maybe start with some memories of that first Super Bowl? It wasn't even called the Super Bowl, I don't think, back then.
No, it wasn't. And it was kind of kicked around as a joke. It started out as a joke between Lamar Hunt, the owner of the Chiefs, and Roselle didn't like it. My wife and I agreed, Carol and I agreed, it'll never work. I mean, that Super Bowl, there was a little ball, there was a very bouncy ball with a lot of resilience at that time that people threw for their dogs. It was called a Super Ball. And
Yes.
I really think that's where it came from. So it was a strange environment, but there was nothing strange about playing the Dallas Cowboys 2 weeks earlier, which was a doggone war. I mean, it was an incredible football game between two really good teams. And then up pops Kansas City Chiefs. And we sort of thought they'd be a joke until we started watching the film, and they weren't a joke at all. They were getting ready to be really good, as we saw a couple of years later in Super Bowl IV, but they were already plenty good by the time we played.
When you were preparing for a game like that, this is sports and faith, right? What we do here at Sports Spectrum. And, there's, a prayer at the 50-yard line after each NFL game. Guys get together there. There's usually a pregame prayer. There's a chapel the night before. That's current NFL world. What was the faith aspect like for you when you were playing in that first Super Bowl with Vince Lombardi? As we know, many know a man of faith as well. What was that like in that first Super Bowl from that perspective?
We didn't have the formal chapel services. That came later. Actually, when I got to the Baltimore Colts, we always had chapel. We had Bob Vogel, Don Shinnick, Raymond Berry, all very fervent Christians, and Coach Shula encouraged us to have our chapel programs. Coach Lombardi was a man of faith, and he talked at length about our priorities being your faith, your family, and the Green Bay Packers. We joked that he got confused about the order of the priorities, but never in his presence.
That's right.
He was a daily celebrant, went to mass every single day. And when I started being critical of him, then I saw an example of real faith in Bart Starr, who instructed me as his little brother. He had already adopted me, and then it stayed that way until his death. He said, "Bill, don't be judgmental. That's not what our faith is about. You're being judgmental of Coach Lombardi because you don't know about his form of faith. You think he's not devout. He goes to church every day. He goes to mass every morning. Now, when you've been working for this man about 3 weeks, you may think he needs to go to church every day, but you're not to say things like that." And Bart was, he didn't go around trying to be a moral compass, but I began to watch him as a great example of what a true Christian lives out while trying to be a great competitor at the same time. And of course, nobody was a greater competitor than Bart Starr. So he set the tone for us.
For sure. And it's interesting to hear stories of what those years were like. You mentioned coming to Baltimore. It was the Baltimore Colts, of course, at that time. And you said faith was I wouldn't say a more important element, but chapel was inexistent there. Can you kind of share a little bit about like what was the rhythms like for you as a player? Was there team Bible studies during the week? Was there anything like that, couples Bible studies like there is in a lot of, NFL teams today?
There were all of those things. Couples Bible studies, wives Bible studies, players Bible studies, and the guys on the team led them and have continued through the rest of their lives, those that are still living. Don Shinick is no longer living, but Raymond Berry and Bob Vogel have been active in maybe not a formal ministry, although Bob Vogel has been in a formal sense, has been a minister for a long time. And there are many others that I'm leaving out now that I wish I had time to sit down and really think it through. But those are the guys that set a great example for the rest of us. And I had already met them through Fellowship of Christian Athletes conferences. Yeah. So when I walked in the locker room, I knew what to expect, and it was a very nurturing environment. It was also a great football team.
Yeah, it was a very good football team. You won Super Bowl V, and of course, Super Bowl III was the New York Jets upset over the Colts.
We don't talk about three.
That's right, Coach. We won't talk about three. Bill Curry is joining us here on Sports Spectrum. I wanted to ask you about the 1 year. I don't think I've ever talked to you about this. It was your last year, and it just kind of marries together one of the teams in this year's Super Bowl, the Los Angeles Rams. You actually finished your career with the Rams. I went back and looked at that team, and they were a pretty good team with some very young, up-and-coming talent who performed pretty well. What are your memories about that final year playing with the Rams?
I felt like we should have been in the Super Bowl, and we were one extra point from going to the Super Bowl. We got beat by the Vikings 14-13 in Minnesota. And well, good gosh, our front four was Merlin Olsen, Freddie Dreyer, Jack Youngblood, and Larry Holmes. I mean, think about that. Hacksaw Reynolds was the middle linebacker, and football people are sitting out there salivating because they know these names, even though it was a long time ago. It was a great defensive football team. The offense was almost as good. We had confusion at the quarterback position, and I think that's what cost us. John Hadle played much of the year, then he was traded. James Harris took over. And I think if Shaq had been able to play all year, I think we would have finished the job. I think we would have been able to. We had a great running game. We had great wide receivers with Jack Snow and Harold Jackson. I mean, those guys were big leaguers, all of them. It was really fun to be there. The only reason I was there is because I had been president of the Players Association and had been waived through the league. Naturally, that's what always happens. Mm-hmm. If you make a stand, as we've seen recently.
Yes.
So some of us had been cut and waved through the league, but our owner, Carol Rosenblum, if you ever produced for him, he never forgot it. And he called me and said, why don't you come out, and we need a backup center. And I'm not sure how much they needed me. I snapped for extra points and field goals. But it was great fun to be there with that bunch of guys.
Yeah, and that was a team, if you pay attention to football in the 70s, once they got the quarterback position right, and in many cases, maybe they still hadn't figured it out. There was Pat Hayden, and then there was Vince Ferragamo, and even Ron Jaworski was young before he went to Philadelphia. That was a team that was in the playoffs or in the Super Bowl pretty much every year through the 70s. Yeah. And even competed into the 80s when guys like Eric Dickerson started arriving on the scene. So the Rams have always had a really good team for many years there. And then they fell off, and then they moved to St. Louis, and then they came back to LA, and now they're in the Super Bowl hosting the Super Bowl at SoFi Stadium as a home team. When you look at this year's Super Bowl matchup and you look at a team like the Rams, one of your former teams, what comes to mind when you think about how the Rams were able to get to where they got to, and certainly the Cincinnati Bengals that nobody saw coming, with an upstart quarterback in his second year taking the Cincinnati Bengals all the way to the Super Bowl? What are your thoughts when you look at this matchup?
Amazement. I'm shocked that either of those teams is there. I didn't think either of those teams would have the stuff, the grit, they got enough talent. Both of them with Burrow and Chase, the wide receiver.
Yeah.
And the other people they've got surrounding them, and the way their defense played against Tennessee, what I thought would be their Achilles heel would be their offensive line, and the Chiefs couldn't get to him. I mean, he got sacked once. That was the difference in the game. So to me, it's the answer to your question is I'm surprised that either of the teams is there. I think a lot of people are.
When you look at a Matthew Stafford, right, and it's his, multi-year career in Detroit, and, he played pretty well for teams that weren't that well, and he gets a chance now to be surrounded by a lot of talent. When you look at a player like that, what emotions come to mind when you think about a player who just has grinded for so many years and now he kind of gets that opportunity? We've seen that with many players over the years who have played on teams that weren't that good and just kept going. And then sometimes they get that one opportunity or that one break and a chance comes. And this is what's happened with Matthew Stafford.
Well, I'm a Georgia Tech guy, and Stafford is a Bulldog, and we've had enough of the Bulldogs around the state. We live in Atlanta, so and we love Kirby Smart and his wife. My wife and I got to know them at a social thing, and so we were happy for them that they won. But we've had an awful lot of the dogs, and my father was a Bulldog, so I grew up with all that. But what really touched me was watching Matthew Stafford and his wife after the game. She has endured incredible adversity with the cancer, and he stood right by her side through it all. And football has nothing to do with any of it, but somehow there was vindication, and for them to have that kind of joy that only comes when, in our business, it only comes when you win big. It really does. It's a shame, but it's the truth. And I'm happy. I'm happy for them and for that moment and for other moments I hope they have.
So my last question to you, Bill, and it's always a treat to talk to you, to have you on our show. What's God been kind of speaking to you and showing you? You mentioned 79, God's been blessing you with a lot of years, hopefully a lot more years. But when you think about where you are, what's he been showing you? What's the Lord been teaching you today?
I have a great Christian counselor, and I know I'm not supposed to worship him, and I don't. He's been by my side for over 30 years. He's a pastoral counselor at our church, and I still have a lot of gumption and a lot of competitiveness, which can turn into anger and judgmental BS in a hurry.
Yeah.
And in the political world today, I have done that. I detest lying. I detest people who don't keep their word. I shouldn't look down my nose at them, because I have been those people at one time or another. So I called him. I'll never forget the phone call. This was a year and a half ago. I said, I got a real problem. I detest this guy. He said, I said, what, do we need to pray? He said, no, we don't need to pray. I need for you to go look in the mirror right now. That's all it took.
Wow.
So you asked me what God's teaching me. God's teaching me that evil and that capacity to lie and to do things that God tells us specifically not to do. I've done them all. And so for me to stand in judgment of other people, yes, you have to decide who to vote for, but not to become vindictive and hateful. So how are people going to know if we really are followers of Christ? How they're supposed to know? Well, the instructions are clear: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It's right there in the fruits of the Spirit. If we read that every day and lived it, especially to those people that we don't like, and learn to love the people and pray for the people that we disagree with every day. Those are the orders I received. I did not like them. I didn't want to get those orders, but that's what God's doing with me. He is making me pray for the people that I didn't care for. And I'm learning to love them in spite of our differences. And I would have never thought that this would happen. But then he's got a lot of surprises, doesn't he?
He certainly does, Bill Curry. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you. I hope we can do it again soon. And thanks so much for being here on Sports Spectrum. All the best to you. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Well, thank you, Jason, for having me on. We'll do it anytime you want to.
Well, such a unique way to close out the season. I love just getting to be here with Brock, Jason, and myself. And we thank you for being here with us throughout the course of the season as well. And as we wrap up the inaugural season of the Sports Spectrum Weekly Slant, I wonder for both of you guys, what's the greatest thing that you've learned throughout the process of us doing this show together yet apart, which in a way has been reflective of the world that we've been living in for the last 2 years? Brock, I'll ask you first.
That's a good question, Jade. I would probably say I feel like our world wants authenticity more than ever. Even as it is divided, even as it is on Zoom, even as it is remote. I don't care what the medium is, what the platform is. And for us, it's the NFL and football and college football and high school, as Jason said, to start the show. I think there's a yearning for authentic, just conversation, authentic relationship. And I know as we've reached out to some of these different guests over the year, and Jason's done so much of the booking. And again, Jason, your heart for this is just a joy for Jade and I to be a part of. But, the guests' joy to be, want to be involved, that they want to share their story. They want to share their genuine faith. I think I've learned, I knew that, but I think these 22 episodes have solidified that for me.
Yeah, Jason, before you answer, I think of Dalton Reisner, and when you reached out to him, his response was immediately, anything for Jesus. I'm in.
That was it.
Anything for Jesus. And here he was, and I had a chance to talk with him.
Yeah, it's funny when I reached out to Dalton, and thankfully we had a previous relationship because he was featured in Sports Spectrum's magazine back in the fall issue. But when I texted him, it was the day after they had won a game and they're in the middle of a playoff race. And Monday mornings when you're talking about offensive linemen, and they are sore. Everybody's sore after a game on Sunday, but those offensive linemen in the trenches are feeling that pain. And he talked about that on the show, or actually might have been after we stopped recording. But when he just said anything for Jesus, we'll make it work, just figure out the time. Yeah, that was a nice reminder from him, I think, to understand the magnitude of a type of show that we do. And, you asked what was something that I learned. I think what I learned was platforms like this. I hope that there are more of them going forward. I really do. I hope there's 100 weekly slant shows in a few years that people are doing and it's more receptive, but I don't think there will be, unfortunately. So I'm thankful, really, is what I learned on this, that we are able to and get to not have to do a show like this, where we can talk more openly about our faith, and we can have all sorts of guests from all different walks of life share about their faith. And some of the the people that we've had on have been at different stages of their life in their faith. But that's the beauty of this. It's about sanctification and all of us trying to grow each day and never thinking that we made it or are there as far as our Christianity or our faith in God comes. So I really believe that, this show is just a great platform. And I really learned that I think it fits into, especially into the world of football. It just really fits well. And there were a lot of people that for one reason or another just weren't available. And so many guests that we didn't have on this show this year that we could look at potentially having them on next season. So I'm excited and I'm thankful. And, I like using the words get to instead of have to.
Sure.
And there are moments when you're doing 22 weeks where you feel like I have to do this. Jade knows some behind the scenes stories that took place around Thanksgiving that were not my favorite. Let's just put it that way. But there was a moment where I felt like at that time that it could have been have to. I really wanted it to be get to. We get to do this. And it was a blessing for sure.
Yeah. And I think that what you realize through all of that is that when you have a greater purpose, that have to really fades away, because when you're serving what you think is a greater purpose, then it is something that you get to do, because
absolutely
it reaches on an entire different level. And some might say the Super Bowl reaches on an entirely different level this year because it's in Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
Some may say that. And gosh, it's between the Rams that were all in to win it all, and of course dreamed of hosting it in their home stadium, and then the Cincinnati Bengals, which nobody picked to be in the Super Bowl. And if you did, I want to hear from you. But I'm not banking on hearing from a lot of people there. So as we look ahead to the big game, how about some predictions, Brock?
Yeah, line of scrimmage wins. Dan Orlovsky said that earlier in the show, and I totally agree with that. And you think back to some of the Super Bowls and the NASCAR package that beat the undefeated Patriots, the Seahawks that took down Peyton and the number one offense. Heck, even last year, it was the Buccaneers front four that took apart Patrick Mahomes. And I just think Aaron Donald in his own building and Von Miller in that front will be the story. Yeah, and a team that spends and the team that went all in and the teams that got all the superstars versus the franchise that pinches every penny, that doesn't spend in that same way, that plays in one of the older stadiums. I think that new stadium going to be reborn and going to be awfully loud, and the Rams and Matthew Stafford are going to win that championship.
Jason, what do you think?
All right. You got to give a score though, Brock. Don't you have a score?
Oh, it'll be like 27-17. I think it'll still be a competitive game, and those Bengals are gritty and tough, and they won't just fold. So 27-17.
Okay. I like that. So we're close in our prediction. I do think the Rams are going to win. I just think they're a better team, but weirdly enough, the better team hasn't, at least from my perspective, won each of these.
Everybody thought the Chiefs were going to win.
Yep.
Everybody thought that the Chiefs were going to beat up the Bengals in the line of scrimmage in the AFC Championship game.
And they were.
Happened.
I mean, they were up 21-3, and I thought the Titans were going to be able to do that, especially on the defensive line, and be able to win that game against Cincinnati. And I thought, the Rams were going to lose to Tampa. I thought Tom Brady, no way that Tom Brady's going to. So there was a lot that took place. The Packers certainly losing to the 49ers. So usually any prediction I've made this postseason has been completely wrong, and it's the opposite of what I'm picking. So take that with a grain of salt, those of you that are watching. I think the Rams win. I think it's going to be low scoring. Just as I watch, to watch what Cincinnati was able to do to Kansas City's high-powered offense in Kansas City and hold them. I think they had 27 points or 24 points. To hold them to that amount of points at home in a conference championship, and I think only 3 after halftime, was quite impressive. And they did it to Tennessee as well. So they can keep the Rams, I think, offense somewhat minimized, but I don't know if their offense, the Bengals, can score enough points. So I'm going 21-17, and I'm picking the LA Rams to do what Tampa Bay did last year, and that's win the Super Bowl in their home stadium. And I do think playing at home, not having to travel, Cincinnati's got to travel all the way to Los Angeles. The Rams literally just got to get out of their house and drive to the stadium. I think that's a big difference as well. And I think that'll help the Rams in the long run. How about you,
guess I'm up,
Jade?
huh?
What are you thinking, Jade? What's your prediction?
You know, from a football perspective, I 100% agree. I mean, they're like it's hard to see a way that the Bengals win given the trenches in this game. But goodness, we've said that for 2 straight games. So
Do it, Jade. Do it, Jade.
There's just a piece of me that's like, the Bengals are going to win the Super Bowl. And like, as I said, from a football perspective, I don't believe it. I really don't. But I don't know. There's just something about this team that I'm like
it.
Really? Could they really do this? If they do, I think it's going to be like a 21-20 type of game. And I think that they will just eke it out in some crazy way. Matthew Stafford will have to, it'll be a turnover and something along those lines for it to happen. But stranger things have happened.
It would be one of the most improbable Super Bowl wins and runs ever if Cincinnati, and they've never won a Super Bowl. So it would be incredible if they somehow pulled this.
It'd be like the 0-1 Patriots, and Joe Burrow is like Tom Brady, right? He's the closest thing, right?
Yeah.
And it was the greatest show on turf, and it's you're not going to beat them, and all of a sudden, we're just gritty and we just hang around, and you give us one more chance, you give us one more opportunity. They got it done 21 years ago, and the Bengals, I think, have that same belief that why not? As you said, Jade, it's been their season so far.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I'm excited. I can tell you that. And I'm so grateful to have shared this space with both of you. And I look forward to what God has in store for Sports Spectrum and for faith and football and the intersection, and our continued ability to share it with each other and with everyone who wants to pull up a computer, a tablet, an iPad, a phone, whatever you have, however you want to watch and listen. We are grateful for you. So guys, thanks for hanging out here on the weekly slant with me throughout the course of the season.
Been a blast, Jade. And thank you, Jason, for your heart to do this, and for all of the guests we had, the 3 great gentlemen today that shared their testimony, their story, their wisdom with football, and all 22 episodes and all the guests over the course of the year. Jade, I echo that sentiment. It's been just an absolute blessing. So thank you for leading it. Jason, thank you for producing it and leading it, and been such a joy to be a part of.
Thanks, guys.
Until next time, that's it for the Weekly Slant. Have a blessed Super Bowl. Enjoy it. And know we'll all be watching some football and talking about it together.